grass-covered mounds, beneath whose smooth turf are buried ocean-going ships fit for a king, and a landscape littered with myriad names for hill and field, wood and wold, creek and fen. A cast of extras, citizens of those troubled times, can be observed as they go about their sometimes eccentric business, digging holes in once fine mosaic floors to make blacksmiths' forges, sending across the known world for an amphora of their favourite brand of olive oil, cursing thieves or rivals in love, venerating headless walking corpses, or arguing over whose flowers produced the nectar collected by their precious honeybees. Even in freeze frame, it is hard to tear one's eyes away from a drama whose beginning is lost in obscurity, but whose denouement was recorded centuries later by a towering intellect of the early medieval world, the venerable Bede. This erudite and curious monk of Jarrow on the muddy banks of the River Tyne, who knew almost all that could be known of the world in his own time, set out to chronicle how Anglo-Saxon kings had been chosen by God to bring about a single universal church and people. He wrote of impious, foolish native Britons who, rejecting the civilizing influence of the Christian Roman Empire, spurned both God and their rightful rulers and descended into civil strife and tyranny. He recounted how the chiefs of invading pagan Germanic peoples made war with and conquered those Britons, how they forged new, powerful kingdoms, how they, in turn, were converted by two Christian missions, one from Iona, the other from Rome, half a century or more before his own time. Bede's story is persuasive. In truth, it is the only credible narrative to survive from the crucible of early medieval Britain. We may now doubt his motives and some of his sources, and even Bede had little to say of the century and a half between the last written notices of Imperial Britannia and the arrival from Rome of St. Augustine on the Isle of Thanet in 597. He covered that century and a half in just 19 lines out of 300 pages in a modern English edition of his Historia Ecclesiastica Gentis Anglorum. But if the truth of this story, how the first Christian kingdoms came into being, cannot be verified, one might still hope to lay bare the whirring, clicking mechanisms that breathed life into his drama, its actors, and their tragicomic tale. The closing episodes of this book will be familiar to those who have read The King in the North. Here, though, they are cast in another light, seen not from Bede's retrospectively assured 8th century perspective, but from the horizon of a new age of experimental institutions and social relations whose witnesses have left us precious little testimony. The First Kingdom is, necessarily, a contemplative history. It might start with an early morning balloon flight over the chalk downs of Salisbury Plain, rising above mist that still clings to the villages, woods, neatly hedged fields and riverside meadows of the Wylye Valley above Heytesbury. Ahead lies a great expanse of grassland, pockmarked with shell holes and veined with chalky tank tracks showing creamy white against the matte green that fills the view to the north. Looking down, you might see tiny red flags hanging limp from their poles, a reminder to keep your distance, for this land belongs to the British Army. In the distance, the squat, square stone tower of a medieval parish church, enfolded by its graveyard flock of tombs and memorials, stands proud of a tight cluster of houses and barns. A timeless scene. A closer look at the hamlet of Imber, whose Old English name, meaning Immer's Pond, is a clue.